So this is Faith and Science, and the notes I got was like 4-day seminar. I'm trying to squeeze it all into 1 hour, so it's going to be very, very quick. And a couple of things, I'm not going to preach to you, I'm not going to lecture to you, so I'm just going to ask questions. And please, I know people in here love this subject, so answer up, speak up. It's going to be common sense questions, so most of it's kind of common sense. If you ever thought about it, you should please interact. So let me go ahead and pray and we'll get started. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for bringing us here. Thank you for the ability to know you and for revealing your glory to us. We ask that your Spirit be among us, that our thoughts, our thoughts and our words will be honored and glorifying to you. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, a couple things. So I'm going to do a brief introduction, just some basic assumptions. So, if you think, I always do this before. If you think that this is some sort of argument, if you want to use this, what we're going to discuss as the tools of argument, trying to convince an unbeliever to believe, I have to say it will not work. I've done it, I've tried it, it does not work. And will somebody open up Romans 1:18 through 23 and read it? Anybody gets there first? But basically, the idea is that...
You want me to read it?
Yes, go ahead and read it.
For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, has been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened.
Thank you. So what that passage basically says that unbelievers, I was one of them, and I fully believe it, that they know God exists, so they choose to suppress that truth by ignoring him, by the ungodliness. So they fully know it. It's just basically their moral states. That's basically the issue. And arguing all this faith and science will not convince anybody or convert anybody. It's by the Spirit, so I encourage, prayer is probably the most powerful tool there is.
And through the gospel, how it says in verse 16, it's the power of God for salvation is the gospel.
Yeah, it's the gospel. So what I'm going to say is definitely. So why do we study this? Well, God commands us to. He calls us to renew our minds, to have an answer, to be prepared, and to know about this. And so my goal of this study, this seminar or this discussion is basically to give an overview of what it is, and to basically to perhaps challenge some unbelievers. And basically the second part, which I'm hoping is the majority of this, is how do you talk to your professors? How do you talk to your non-atheistic friends who have this worldview? How do you engage them? How do you, in a loving way, to be able to challenge them and basically get them to consider Christianity, or to consider the gospel? That's the main thing. So, any other comments, questions on that? I'm going to move on to the next section because we have to be quick. So, what is faith? Can somebody give me a definition of faith? Simple.
Faith are the things that are not seen, the things that are hoped for.
Okay. Any other question? Besides something simple. What if you were to tell? If you were to ask, like maybe an atheistic, I'm assuming that you've all interacted with, especially in college settings, if you're a public university, what would they define faith as? Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know what they would define it as.
Or you can define yourself.
More personally, belief and sort of trust, like this kind of trust is like imbued with love that can be directed towards something where there isn't much hope in that situation, and you're creating that faith, like, without like the things having happened in reality yet, but then through that faith, like trusting that it will.
Yeah, so,
because that's what God wants.
yeah, and the main thing I heard is trust. Faith is a sort of trust. You have faith, the chair that you're sitting on will not break, right? And that's the basic definition.
The atheistic professor will probably define, when they hear faith, they think of blind faith.
Exactly.
They think of, well, to believe something, you just have to kind of make it up in your head, it's blind, and you can't really know if it's true, that's why it's faith, and that's not the biblical definition of faith, but that's how they define it.
Yes, but yeah. So if you were to engage them, you would say that
That's,
faith is a basic element of trust.
yeah.
If
We can know what we believe, not we just have to, Christians don't have blind faith, and
Yeah.
if they say that, then they're not getting what true biblical faith is.
Very good. So what is science? Anybody want to give the definition of science? Knowledge. From Latin, right? Any other thoughts? Science is knowledge. Right?
It's kind of like an art of understanding the world.
Yeah.
Information, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's some sort of logical abstraction of how things work, right? What were you saying?
I have a feeling of deja vu. We did this yesterday.
Yeah, so it's a 1 day conference, so I'm just repeating everything. Yeah, there's another.
Yeah, so there's another one over here.
That's what I was like,
Right.
if you like my talk this much,
Deja
I was like, yes, I gotta repeat. So yeah, but anyway, yeah, science is knowledge. Science is an attempt to abstract, to basically make some logical understanding of our environment. Any other thoughts? I'm just repeating what people said. So yeah, that's so. How does science? If you were to talk to one of your professors or some unbeliever, how do you think they view science?
I think the can I talk a little
Yeah,
bit? I think the presupposition of our culture is that science is absolute truth, and there is absolutely no doubts about like true science. If we can have like basically science trumps everything of faith.
Yeah.
Because their claim is it's exact.
Yeah, so it's like the view of absolute truth. Go ahead.
And I would say too, I try to take when I talk to atheists, I say like, because they'll go to evolution and things like that, I was like, but that's history. You can't scientifically study history.
Yeah.
And so they'll go how the world was created, but you can't go through the scientific method with that.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
so they view science as some sort of metaphysical idea of truth, especially those who are ardent atheists.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a professor, I had a microbiology professor who said, this is not gospel, and they use gospel as a term of something that's unchanging, that's like absolute truth, and their whole point of view is, to him, there's almost a relative view of everything else, and he would use the term gospel in that instant, unlike how we use gospel. So there's also, when you talk to them, there's also a terminology, so you have to understand how they think versus how you think, and not to be blunt with them. So on that note, I am going to, because I'm short on time, I am going to skip the positivist idealist. If you want to talk later, we can talk later. You can come up, find me during lunch. So that's the basic foundation of the idea of how the worldview, how faith and science cannot coexist, and how we can say it does exist, because faith is in basic element is a trusting of something. You can trust that quote unquote the law of gravity will work. Science is nothing more than knowledge. It's also a model, a abstraction of how things work. Go ahead.
If the knowledge is of science, would you agree with me that the knowledge of science is given to us by God?
Yes.
Then
according to the Christian, yes, I would say that, or deist.
Kind of like the world is given to us by God, and we're trying to interpret it.
Yeah, we're trying to interpret it,
Science.
and we'll talk about a little bit more about that later. So go ahead.
I was just going to mention with knowledge about how it even says in Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
Yeah.
So people can't even know science unless they fear the Lord. Truly, they can't have true knowledge in the perspective of a biblical worldview. It just says you can't have knowledge without the fear of the Lord in Proverbs 1:7.
But unbelievers through the general grace that's given to everybody.
Yeah.
They know truth. They fully know truth by what they study, and we know that because unbelievers have have discovered diseases, have further to understand genetics and all that stuff. So we don't want to say like we're somehow better than they are,
Oh,
but we have
no,
more
no.
knowledge, more special knowledge, or we were able to
I
discover.
was just quoting the
Yeah.
verse. I was just quoting the verse.
Yeah, that's all I'm gonna make sure that we don't want to define them.
Mr. Yan, a quick question.
Yes.
Why did you say science and faith cannot coexist?
So faith is nothing. If we view faith as a definition, nothing more than ability to trust an idea, a concept, and science as a form of knowledge, a mathematical a model of what's going around in the world, and they can fully exist. I can say theology is a science because nothing is it's a model of how God works. Right? It's a knowledge of God, right? And I can say I have faith in the law of gravity because I know that when I jump, I'll come back down, right? So
Science is also built on various postulates and such.
I'm sorry?
Built on various ideas that have been tested and tested and tested.
Exactly.
As people are so apt to tell me.
Yeah, so science, that comes from the idea of the scientific method, or the rationalism, where the scientific method says it's a law when it's repeatable and testable, and it's something that we can trust. And it's kind of logical. Yeah, we can get into that a little bit more. Let's go back. Let's move on a little bit because we're short in time. Let's go. I'm going to go through a lot. So imagine you have a friend that does not believe in the existence of a God. We have a lot of that. How would you how would you convince them? How would you talk to them that there is the existence of God? And we're think of it through a scientific context. So you're in one of your science classes or something like that. So go ahead.
I mean, something that you can point out is just the detail in creation that we see.
The design.
Right, intelligent design. That you could just see that the probability of the Earth being exactly the right place in the galaxy with the even amount of heat and coolness to sustain life, oxygen, and even down into organisms, like the design of the human eye is probably the most famous examples of that. I think the term is like irreducible complexity.
Okay, yeah.
That only because of there's so many variables that sustain life, that only an intelligent designer, who we would call God, is the one who could have brought this about.
Okay, the design of how everything's so orderly. Yes, go ahead.
And I go a similar place when I'm having conversations with people about this. I go kind of just ask them questions, kind of like, we both have shirts on our back. We don't just assume that our shirt just appeared. Our glasses, we don't think if we were wearing glasses that they didn't just appear. Our shoes, whatever. Go to physical things. You even see a building. You don't assume that there wasn't a building. You assume that there definitely had to be a building.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, look at creation, the Grand Canyon, the mountains, the sky, everything that we see, even our own bodies, and to think that there wasn't a creator when the littlest thing like a shirt had to be created. How much more our universe?
Yeah, exactly. The design argument is a very powerful argument, saying that if you find something so complex, someone has made it. Any other thoughts besides the design? So what about? Have anybody heard of the uncaused cause? The first mover.
A little bit, but I wouldn't know enough to explain it.
Would you? So this idea. What about Big Bang? If somebody says, comes up to you and say that.
Oh, okay.
The uncaused cause. I'm sorry. The uncaused cause. Yeah.
Where it's basically like a chance after chance after chance after chance. The world
somebody
eventually came into existence.
Yeah, somebody came up and said like, I believe the universe here exists because of the Big Bang, which happened billions of years ago. How would you say that this idea doesn't conflict with Scripture? Anybody?
That the Big Bang.
The Big Bang.
How it does conflict?
How it does or doesn't? How if someone was to say, would you say the Big Bang is unbiblical? If it's not, go ahead.
I would say that
How would
it
you-
could be biblical to the degree that at least to my understanding, it shows that there is a beginning point of creation. There's at least one little point where everything just like explodes, that there is still like a beginning point.
It's kind of dependent on how vague you interpret, like, Genesis 1, for example, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Do you interpret that as, very vague, like, oh, in the beginning God did a big bang, and then, all the cloud of dust particles rearranged into stuff like that? Or do you interpret it as God, bam, and there's earth? It depends on how you interpret the scripture.
Go ahead.
And I would say too, when I talk to people about the Big Bang, because a lot of times they'll have to eventually say matter is eternal.
Yeah.
Because it's either you have an eternal,
Exactly.
self-existent, self-sufficient God, or you have eternal matter. And so, and I would agree with Chris, the Bible doesn't read in the beginning, because I believe Genesis 1 to 3 is actual history.
Okay.
And so I think it reads that God created out of nothing, ex nihilo. And so I think it just shows that God spoke and it was. And so I just think, to think that matter was eternal, and God had to use matter to create, would kind of deny that God created everything out of nothing.
Yeah, then there's a whole other argument where what caused, so big, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was about to say, just what you were about to say, that something had to cause the Big Bang.
Exactly.
That there
Something
was
outside
this
of
massive expansion. So, people, I've heard people theorize, well, the Big Bang happens many times throughout the universe's history, like matter explodes, then it contracts again to a singularity, then explodes again over and over. But what, just like Sam was saying, if it's a continual cycle, either has to be eternal, or the first time there was something that had to make it explode out. So if you're going to accept the Big Bang, as a Christian, you're going to have to also accept that there was there was a mover that made that occur. So,
Exactly, John.
Yeah, so someone has to cause it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't current whatever that instead of slowing down, that the expansion of the universe is actually accelerating now?
Yes, there's some theory. Most of the shift, the Doppler shift in light is actually expanding. They're saying that the universe is expanding faster. There are certain studies that does that. Any other thoughts within this area? Because of cosmology, we just finished cosmology in 15 minutes. So, any other thoughts? Any questions? Well, go ahead, Lydia.
I'm not 100% sure if this was already mentioned, but Jesus was very intentional. Well, God was very intentional, like when He created the world. Whereas science was just like, oh hey, here's a thunderbolt.
And I think just lastly, with creation / Big Bang, I think it affects practically how we view other people. Because if we believe that people are just happen by chance or through the macroevolutionary process, then we don't have to treat them with dignity. If I have a child in the future, Lord willing, and she says, why should I treat my brother with respect? And if I'm coming from an atheistic worldview, I really can't tell her why she should treat her son with respect, her brother with respect.
Okay.
But if I am coming from a Christian worldview, I can say, because your brother was made in the image of God, he's valuable to God, and because God cares about your brother, you should care about him.
Okay.
And so I think practically it's lived out because we say, if God cared enough to create out of nothing, we should care about everyone, believer or unbeliever, because they're made in His image.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. That's a great point. I'll also add that we are, because God created the earth, and we'll read Genesis 1, and we'll have somebody read Genesis 1, that we ought to also treat the earth with dignity and care for it. Any other thoughts with respect to cosmology and Big Bang? Yes, go ahead.
Could you say that science explains how, but not why?
Yes, you can say that. In an instance, somewhat. Again, this is historical science, so we can't really apply the scientific method to it. We can suspect how it's done. Again, it's a suspicion, it's a theory. But yes, we can say that.
We can apply scientific method to things that were in the past. Like apply it to parts of the earth or fossils and just geological stuff like that. But you're right. The most we can do is suspect and make postulates based on other parts of the world that we see, based on other laws of physics and other things we study. What would have happened to this? Why would this be this way? That's the most that you can do with that.
Yes, excellent. Cool. I have to move on. Sorry, because I'm running short time. So let's go to the second part. There's a huge challenge to a huge challenge by the atheist or the non-believer to Christians in the field of science in the past time. How would you? So I'm assuming well, I went to public school as a kid, and if you remember, like you studied about Galileo, how the church excommunicated Galileo because he refused to believe in the flat Earth concept. How would you answer to that kind of challenge? How science represses, how Christianity represses scientific progress? How would you, like?
First, I would say that he just insulted the Pope on something entirely different.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Some of the science he didn't. He insulted like a couple of the cardinals. You know, thoughts? Go ahead.
Well, like, you know, so we have the gospel, we have like some way to think about God and like connect with God, but it's like one person's interpretation of something that they can't even, like that it's a little bit hard to like put into words, and then to take their own model and like put that onto the world. I mean, that's not necessarily, that's that person's interpretation. So like obviously like some people are gonna come up with ideas or conflicts that might not actually exist. And so like if you're judging the way the church reacted, it's more like the way a human was trying to understand God, and like how as like we learn more about science, we can actually learn more about God, and it doesn't have to be like this like conflict, I think.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I would take them to the book of Job. The book of Job, probably the first book of the Bible ever written, said that God holds the earth and it's a sphere. So he holds it over nothing, which we learn in science is the earth just basically holds up. And we know that the earth is a sphere. And when science didn't know that, the book of Job knew that. God's word. So I would take him to a place older than, so a place where I could say, this is what God's word has always said, even though science hasn't.
So somebody points out, so I'm quoting to Wikipedia, if you ever go on Wikipedia, or they actually have like Psalm 93, which doesn't exist on there, but they have, Wikipedia says that according, if you Google Galileo, and it says that, it quotes the scripture saying that the earth is set on its foundation, cannot be moved, and the sun rises and sets and returns to its place. So those arguments, you heard these arguments before, right? That's how the Middle Ages church interpreted that scripture, saying that the earth is therefore flat and not moving, and the sun is revolving on earth. How would you respond to that, or anybody?
Well, just even if people are in a culture that is ignorant of a scientific principle, that doesn't invalidate the truth of the rest of what we believe. Just because I might not know the way that gravity works, I think that it's angels pulling things down to the earth. Even if I believe that, that doesn't mean that Jesus is my Lord and Savior is also inherently a false statement. I think people look at the Bible, or not the Bible, but they look at Christians and they say, oh, well, you're ignorant of this, therefore I can reject the rest of your faith. So I don't have a problem with people being ignorant of all scientific principles, because there's a lot to keep track of, and not everyone can be a scientist. But I think it's also important to point out to those who don't believe that, even if there are ignorant Christians or the church has been ignorant of scientific principles in the past, that doesn't mean that our concept of sin and salvation and redemption is somehow flawed as well.
Yeah, I'd say so. We were just in Billy's movie seminar, and he was talking about how there's two realities that are the glory of Christ and the fallenness of man. And I think particular points, especially in the church over history and just in general, they kind of do impede scientific progress a lot. I think just maybe the church is just kind of scared of scientific progress sometimes. Just like it's a challenge. Like you should. It's not that they should try to keep people from progressing, but they should try to challenge it and try to, see how it fits with the Bible instead of, excommunicating Galileo in that example.
He was placed under house arrest, arrested, and then died.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead. You're still going. Still going.
My train of thought,
Okay.
went into
With particularly with that, with the idea of the, particularly with the idea of the verse you read from Psalms, I think it's important. Like part of the issue is the scientific, unbelieving world is saying, look at the Bible, like it's false because it's saying that the world is flat or whatever. But the way that the weathermen give the they talk about sunset and sunrise and sunset, even though we know that that's not true. The sun is stable and the earth is, going around the sun. They still, and that's exactly how the poetry of the Psalms is describing. Like the sun seems like it's rising and setting, and it's the same thing we say, the weatherman says every day. Sunrise, sunset.
Yeah, we have to admit, like, some people interpret scripture wrong because they didn't study the language. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that in the Bible it says that the gospel is just not something that mankind or the human mind can really understand fully. So I think a lot of it is, like, science can be brought into that in the sense that, like, there's things we're never going to fully be able to mesh together and understand, and same thing with, like, trying to piece together science with the Bible and with new things, new science discoveries. We're always going to be kind of fearful of it because we can't fully understand it.
To me personally, I don't see the need why the church should be afraid of the progress of science, since the knowledge was given to us by God. It's one knowledge and it's from one source. So I don't see why the church should be afraid. It's more to me like a religion, a church religion, rather than trust in God.
Yeah, actually, that's the point I was going to get to before the train of thought.
Let's let him go. I'm sorry, Matt.
Sam, it's okay.
Sam.
No worries. And I was going to say, kind of off Kimmy's point, it's so easy when we go, and not that we shouldn't study why we believe the Bible, and we shouldn't just believe the Bible because someone told us. We should know the reasonings why we believe the Bible. But I think the problem with a lot of people is they go to the Bible with a critical spirit, and instead of the Bible criticizing them. And so we go, let's find how the Bible's wrong, instead of, well, maybe the Bible's going to tell me how I'm wrong. And so when we change our mindset on how we view the inerrant word, we look at it with, not that I can have the power to criticize this book, but it criticizes me.
So I also wanted to make the last, one of my points is general versus special revelation. We believe that the Bible is special revelation to us because it gives us knowledge into God, and theology is the study of that Bible. General revelation, science is the study of the general revelation. Those things should never contradict. Either one of our interpretations is wrong or the other interpretation is wrong, and they should. Because if we truly believe, and if the Bible is God's word, the word of God, that they should never contradict. Something's wrong in that scenario if that ever happens.
And with the two books, the general and special, like we believe as Christians, or we should believe that they're both inerrant.
Yes.
General
exactly.
Revelation's inerrant, and the Bible's inerrant. And so we can't go to either one and say, well, this one's, it's the way we interpret it.
And to further that point, if you study in field science, you're doing nothing less than studying God's glory, right? God's creation, and you're not doing anything. You're just holy as any theologian that's studying out there.
The heavens declare the glory of God.
Yeah. So excellent. I'm running short of time. I'll just skip the rest of this. So there's also just to say there's Mendel. There's the Ivy Leagues, all founded by Christians. All the Ivy Leagues. Did not know that. Almost all the Ivy Leagues. Columbia, Harvard. You can go Google about that. Their histories. It's founded by some really missionaries and seminaries and stuff like that. And these schools produced a lot of Nobel Prize winners who changed how we know about science. So science is embedded in our DNA. It's embedded within Christian, and as Christians we should pursue science, which is next. So let's since I'm running out of time and we're almost lunch, let's go and move on to evolution. Sorry, I guess
Just a simple,
just a 10 minute wrap of evolution. So,
you're actually good, I mean, you can go to like 5 up if you want.
okay, we'll see. So what is wrong with evolution, somebody? What is right or wrong with evolution? Go ahead.
Well, one of the biggest problems for me is that if you accept a non-God-based origin, it sort of devalues what it means to be human to me. We believe that humans were created in the image of God. And if you say, well, we started out as some sort of aquatic creature who became a land creature, who became a mammal, who became a human, then if for some, God in the Bible says that He made man a little lower than the angels, and then, we're clearly a special creature to God, and we're special enough that Jesus took the form of a man. So I think that that's just the biggest thing for me, is that humans are special because humans are special to God, and I think that if you say that there's this long train of descent from animals, that it devalues them.
I was going to actually quote Psalm 8, which you actually said, and it says that the NLV actually quotes a little lower than God. That's what it's basically how the NLV translate that. So yes, the value of the human life is very evolution, or not atheistic evolution does that. Anybody else want to talk about macro and micro, or some probability theory? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to go microevolution. I don't really necessarily have a problem with for a Christian, because if we're defining microevolution basically as adaptations, if I would go to Antarctica, I would adapt to the climate. That's in it. Am I defining microevolution kind of more adaptations? I know there's a lot more involved, but at a simple level, kind of adaptations is microevolution. Or
yeah. So there's another terminology, specification, where I think the macro is
species change to
species going to,
which is you can't believe as a Christian.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Unless
you deny the scripture.
Unless you deny.
I interpret microevolution as kind of like the theory of natural selection or whatever. Macroevolution is trying to apply that to like an origin.
Yeah, well, it's not even. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, I always interpreted macroevolution as the world, the life on Earth as it is came to be through evolution, while microevolution is just like the theory itself, creatures adapt to certain environments and.
Yeah, that's what I think of microevolution. I think of adaptation, which of course happens.
That was just what I was going to say. I think it is very possible that God made humans and animals and everything to adapt to their environment as it changes, because it's not like everything's going to stay the same. All environments stay the same. Things change, and I definitely think God could have designed things to adapt to their environment. And that just shows even more thought and creativity and intentionality.
Go ahead. I'll let her go.
Yeah, no problem.
She's good.
I'm just learning now, because I've never actually heard many arguments against evolution, but I do know that, the way I could see it is evolution can happen, but with God's plan in it, and so, but also I know in Darwin's treatise, everybody focused on law of selection or survival of the fittest. But he actually uses the term love to describe that change more often than survival of the fittest. So a lot of people read that and took it a certain way. Because they have the kind of altruism or the growth of the species, and the love that was there was something that he also observed. So I think that points to something deeper.
Yeah, Darwin was a deist, at least.
Yeah. Oh, really? Was it?
Yeah. If you read, of course, our history will view him as atheist.
So he believed in a God.
Yeah, he did. He used to be a Christian too. He was part of I think he was a Catholic. He was part of the church and everything.
So he has some theological background. Right?
Yeah, he went to. I think he was in school. He wanted to be theologian, and then and then he ended up going off in a different direction. Yeah. But he started out.
But he was at least a deist, even in Any mathematicians in here? I'm sorry, do you have
Yeah, just with the macro evolution thing, where they'll go a lot of times is the finches. They change beaks, and to kind of prove evolution. The birds, and I would just say that's not macroevolution, because there's never a testable or seen time when a species has changed species, and unless you just want to say, well, billions and billions of years ago, but that doesn't really help us. And so they always say, well, species change species, but that we've never seen that actually happen.
Yeah, specification is a hard thing. So any mathematicians, I'm sorry.
The divine nature of like the genetic code itself, like, you know, in the way that it turns on, the way, like the beauty in that. So, like, I don't think it's negating God to like have to understand that we only know part of like why genes work the way they do, what is the meaning of life, like why the brains work the way they do and stuff like that too. So I don't see them as like one or the other.
You don't see evolution as
Just
one,
kind of like
one or
a-
the other.
Yeah, like I think I could definitely.
Can you, so you're, so there's a theistic
I mean,
evolution that
Yeah.
yeah, there's a, you want to go back home and you can Google, there's called theistic evolution, you can read about that. Any mathematicians in here? So do you know, so you're a mathematician, do you, can you estimate the probability, have you studied any like biology, like how the probability of genetics
No,
changing?
I'm a computer scientist and math.
Okay, have you done evolution, not evolution, adaptive algorithms where they use called evolutionistic algorithms?
Sorry, no.
No,
I'm
anyway,
a freshman.
but I'm running short on time. I'm running short on time, so I'm not going to go through this. So basically, the bottom line is if you go research it, and if you do it in computer science, you realize that
It's something related to the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. The probability of evolution, genetic modifying the calculus, it's nearly impossible of a Chicago World Series. That's pretty much it. And scientists, even atheistic scientists, have realized this, and they can't defend it because they realize like this is just the probability of even ammonia. So amino acids coming together to form life is not that. So let's go back to the origin of life. Have anybody heard any other theories of origin of life besides Genesis?
The Big Bang, right?
No, that's cosmology. Let's go.
So origin
of
of life.
Origin.
Seeding.
Huh? What's it called?
Extraterrestrial seeding.
Yeah, so I'm not joking. So Stephen the guy that wrote the God Delusion, what's his name?
Richard Dawkins.
Richard Dawkins had come to realize that the probability of life coming together and evolution coming together and life coming out. So he realized this probability is nearly impossible. So he came up with, he believes in what's called the panspermia theory. That's the most common atheistic theory. And their theory is that aliens brought DNA to Earth.
You're not joking.
I'm not joking. I have a quote from it. I don't have time to read the quote, but if you go home and just Google Stephen Hawking, he says that aliens brought DNA to Earth, and that's why when you go on those nature channels, they look for aliens, right? That's why. Go ahead.
So then, where did the aliens come from?
Don't ask me. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how much.
Suppression is real.
Yeah, so I'm telling you. So this is how bad they one time did deny an ultimate God, but they would accept aliens bringing DNA.
Wow.
Sure.
Wait, what was the name of the thing again?
Panspermia.
And then they have on them actually crystals, and it's another popular.
Exactly. Where does aliens come from?
Maybe the aliens are eternal.
The aliens are eternal. So it's a little bit screwy. Yeah, I'll quote this since I have a little bit of time. Life could spread from planet to planet or from stellar system to stellar system carrying on meteors. That's Stephen Hawking's on Origins
The Stephen Hawking.
in 2009. So he said this somehow. So either aliens brought DNA from their ships or some meteors.
Wait, is it Stephen Hawking or Richard Dawkins?
No, that's
Stephen
that's
Hawking.
Stephen Hawking.
Oh,
Richard
okay.
Dawkins said something similar. I don't know
Okay.
this exact quote.
No worries.
But they all come.
Agreed.
The other theory they come up with is string theory, which there's multiple dimensions and there's and then something impossible that can happen will eventually happen because something impossible will become possible because, yeah. Anyway, you can also Google that too. I'm not gonna read it.
Yeah, are you gonna go more to morality?
Yeah. So that's my last part. So anybody know about Hitler and atheism?
Oh, we're on eugenics now?
It
Yeah.
wasn't.
It
wasn't.
Have anybody studied Mein Kampf? Mein Kampf by Hitler. So he was a strong. He was. We are going to talk about eugenics because it's part of morality within Hitler. So if you study Mein Kampf, which Hitler wrote, he was the whole idea of Nazism is survival, based on the idea of survival of the fittest, right? If you recall your history class, the whole idea of getting rid of the lesser, the mentally defective, will create a super race. That's their whole goal. Any history major here? History majors? No history majors. So I love history. Yeah. So I actually visited some of their. There's a plaque that was placed in one of the concentration camps, and it basically said Hitler wanted to raise a whole society, a whole generation that's devoid of a conscience, and it's literally plaqued in there. He says that whoever survives, I'm quoting this, whoever survived these harsh resistance has been tested and tried, thousandfold hardened, rendered fit to continue the process of procreation. So his whole idea is to deal brutality into the race. That's what he calls them. But it's very interesting. I'll have time to talk more about it. But if you go home, if you're a history buff, there's lots of. So that's morality. Well, I'm not saying that every single atheist. I don't claim every single atheist are like Hitler. But I'm saying that I'm not calling them that. I know there's a lot of atheists that are very morally. They care about the environment. They genuinely they demonstrate the common grace that we all have, and they're very helpful. But if you were to follow the lines of evolution of the stronger of the fittest, it's difficult. You can come to these conclusions, and if you listen to a lot of the apologetics stuff, they would say that that it was German that German was the most progressive society. It was the Germans that brought this line and was teaching this line in their classrooms. That eventually that worked out through history. So you can see.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have 2 minutes left. Can someone read Genesis? I have about 5 minutes left. And I'll just end this by reading Genesis 1. Can somebody just read that? And then we can.
Yeah, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, somebody just read Genesis 1. And just read the whole chapter, and then we were pretty much done. We just covered everything.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse to separate the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetations, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be light," lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let there be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, let birds fly above the earth across the expanse. So God created the great sea creatures, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and on every living creature that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day.
So, thank you. So, two things I do want to point out from that passage is that the value of human life that was given, that the imago Dei, the image bearing that humans have. So that's why the Christian worldview, the Christian belief, places so much emphasis and so much value into human life. Is because we bear God's image. It's like you driving around with it's like a crude illustration, but it's like you have your works truck and you're driving around, and if you did something illegal, you bear that your company's logo, right? You bear God's logo, and that's why it makes sin so much. It ruins God's name, because it ruins God's image, because you bear His image. So we do bear His image, and that's why we value life. And there's the other part is that God created the earth, His creations. He's given us to guard it, to rule over it, and that He calls that good. And that's why as Christians we should be environmentalists. I mean, to a certain extent, because we should care for the earth and to use it. So there's also the argument, if you want to talk more later, about six-day creationists, six-day creation where God created everything in 6 days, versus the old earth and young earth creation theories. If you're interested, you can stick around. I thought we were supposed to be done by 11:50, but we got 5 minutes. Anybody have any thoughts on that, really quick, in 5 minutes?
I think one thing to note is that there's Christians on both sides of that equation, and it's important to be very gracious as you think about these things. Part of it is we're finite, and we don't know everything.
Yeah. I mean,
and so part of the issue with when we're thinking about the scripture, we're thinking about how God wrote those passages in Genesis 1 and 2. There's believers on each side saying we think this is epochs of time in the day, because the sun's not even, the sun hasn't been created until day 3. Okay, so the issue of time and all those sorts of things. And so whatever side you come down on, like 6-day, 24-hour, or epochs, old earth, young earth, part of what we're saying here is this is not this is not a gospel thing.
Yeah.
That there's Christians in both camps of old Earth and young Earth, and that's okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And just to add, I agree with everything Mr. Chris just said, and also too, with creation, people don't have to believe in 6 24-hour days, or they can believe in the 6. How did you explain it?
Epic time periods
Yeah.
of the days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The things that are essential to Genesis, I would say, and correct me if someone disagrees with me, is that God created, that God was the author, that there was actually a literal Adam and Eve,
Yep.
that Adam and Eve were literal people, and there was a literal fall,
Yeah.
but we wouldn't need a savior.
Right.
And so people as Christians can affirm those 3 things, and I'm praising God for that. But if there's no literal Adam and Eve and no literal fall, then Jesus came in vain.
Yeah. So when we witness to people who come struggle with this, saying how can God create in 6 days, I screwed up majorly on this before too. So it's not. We don't want this to be a barrier to them coming to faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that just like you were saying, this can be a very divisive topic, but we have to remember that this is what's often called secondary doctrine. The primary doctrine is about the gospel, the message of salvation, and a lot of these other things are just kind of like, what carpet should we put in the church type things. You know what I mean? It's not essential for salvation, but it's very easy to get really mad with other Christians about talking about evolution and Big Bang and these sort of things, which are really fun to talk about, obviously, but it's also really easy to make enemies even within the church. So I'm sometimes cautious / reluctant to talk about it with other Christians because I don't want this to be something that divides us. I think that if we can talk about it in the spirit of grace and acceptance and walk away, still understanding that we're on the same team, that's good, but we should also understand that the message of salvation is the most important thing to talk about.
Amen. And I think, thoughts. Got 2 minutes. We just covered.
I have one plug for the people around Maryland. Dr. Jack Collins, who is one of my professors at Covenant Seminary, he's written a pretty good size. He's an MIT grad, just a brilliant mind. He was MIT scientist. He went to study theology and in England, and so his big thing is like faith and science, and he's written a couple big books dealing with these issues. He's actually coming to Wallace and to the campus in October to the University of Maryland. So if anybody's around I'd love for you to hear him, and he's going to be talking about these issues, faith and science.
So I just crunched everything into an hour or less than an hour.
Yeah, way to go.
I didn't talk that much. Thank you for coming.